Happy Wednesday. Okay, we've made it to the middle of the week. Excuse me. Okay, so on the screen, what I have open here, there's a lot of files. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these in an extreme detail. I do want you to go back and examine them and see what's in them. I am going to highlight some important information, however. So starting with the first one, reading assignments. Okay. This is all about how effectively you can create critical analysis from your reading. And for the most part, this is all common sense. So I want you to keep in mind, this is common sense. Okay. Notice it's in big, awkward red type. You should read the material more than once. It's important to read it at least 3 times. So whatever I assign you in terms of the literature, you need to read it 3 times to make sure you understand it before you start writing an analytical paper or paragraph on the material. Your first reading is always an emotional reaction to the text. You should try to enjoy it, but I understand that some of these stories and essays and commentaries are going to be a little dry. You have to find a way to make it click and make it at least an entertaining point of your reading. Now, what I've learned, I often have to be in an environment where there's no distraction whatsoever to get through Plato. Gilgamesh was easy enough for me. Literature is easy. The nonfiction writing for me is a little more difficult. So that's where I have to be in an environment without any distraction whatsoever. But that's my habit, my reading habits. So the first reading is emotional. The second reading will be more analytical, because that way you can answer any possible questions you have over the text. The more you go over the text, the more you understand it. The more you understand it, the better it is to analyze it. If anything, when you start reading something a second time, you're confirming what you already know, and you're discovering if you misread something. So even I, in my old age, I have misread material, and I go back, and when I read it, I realize where I had fallen off the path. Okay? In this beginning analysis phase, your second reading, always see what makes the work successful. Or, on the flip side, what doesn't make the work successful. Have a defined reason why it works or why it doesn't work for you. Okay? You can't just say, I don't like it because it's dry. You got to have a specific reason why the topic does not relate to you. And finally, the third reading, that's when you're at a heightened critical analysis. Because you can practically predict exactly what's going to happen, you have everything memorized practically, you can now safely, critically analyze the material and compare it to another piece another piece that you've read 3 times. Okay? We're building a library in your head that you can use in the future for other papers, for other majors. Specifically, when we talk about Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, any of the other Greek philosophers we'll cover, Descartes, when we get to Descartes, a rationalist. So all this material can be used in another major. You can twist it to apply. So what we're looking at when you analyze, you're looking at the author's strategy, and in literature specifically, you're looking for hidden symbols and possible inspirations for the author. If there is time in the course, I will show you material that displays Plato's inspirations and where he got a lot of his ideas. Worst comes to worst, I might just post the material, if you're curious, out in Schoology, and you can look at it at your convenience. But I really want to try to get that into the curriculum as much as possible. So, but as it is, so you're analyzing, you're looking at the author's strategy, looking at the elements basically that make the work, what makes the text work for you, or what fails to make it work for you, and what are the possible inspirations? What themes are developing that are from society? What themes are coming out of other readings that the author himself or herself could have conducted? Okay? So that's analysis and reading. I do have out here some 10 quick tips on how to stay focused when reading. Do carefully look this over. This is, again, common sense. The thing I like, the first 5 come from a website I found online. The second 5 are all my personal ideas. 6 and 7 in particular, I find this actually works. No matter how tired or exhausted or drawn out and overwhelmed you are, take a moment, breathe in, exhale, and take about 15 minutes to a half hour just to read, to relax. Okay? If you can read for 15 minutes a day, sooner or later you can start increasing that time to half an hour a day. And that half hour can change to an hour a day. So the more you read daily, the more you have chances to increase that daily amount. If you see where I'm going with that. You want to try to increase the amount of time you are reading. Larger and larger intervals. You're making time to get the reading done. And this, again, is building up material that you will use in your major, regardless of what your major is. This is all about analysis and critical connections that you're bridging together. Okay? So be sure to look at all those points. It won't take you long. Okay, now, what prevents an A paper? On this handy dandy little chart I've made up, I'm only going to go over a few of these items on a daily basis. There are 10 items. Okay, so for today I'm going to talk about synthesis. The first item on the list. The last 2 years specifically, I've noticed students were giving me grammatically correct papers. They were showing evidence from the text that they've read, but they weren't using strong synthesis, and that was in effect breaking down the defense and tearing apart their whole point of the paper. Synthesis is important because it's showing your academic understanding of material. Okay? So there are 3 components with synthesis. I just love that word. It makes it sound like I'm listening. Synthesis. Okay. If your paper lacks synthesis, you will not have an A paper. Short, sweet, and to the point. You need the synthesis. So, I've color-coded these ingredients that make up a cube. You got a yellow, you got a goldish orange, you got blue. Yellow is the evidence from the literature that you see in your reading, what you apply to your papers. You do this with a lens, okay? Whatever lens you use, whatever evidence you collect, this is a part of the cube. The goldish orange are your observations. Again, utilizing the lens. Okay, so your observations combined with the evidence you find from the reading under the lens, you synthesize together. Plus, you add other critics' views. Other authority figures are blended into this paper. So, synthesis is vital for academic writing. These papers combine three elements in a fashion which defends students' main observations. As a result, all paragraphs must show how your connections work and how they compare with one another. In other words, you must demonstrate how the evidence works. You can't just give me a quote, close out with a quote, and expect the instructor to give you a good grade. That's called just blocking out the paper, cut and pasting the paper. Okay? You want to blend everything together. So once you have evidence with strong transitions, you're guiding the reader, you're guiding the instructor through your analytical formula. Okay? You want to show what you've learned and how your observations tie into the actual product. What I have done, well, before I do this, let me skip to the proper, I was about to mess up. So I have a word of the day for Wednesday, synthesis. Okay, so officially, synthesis is the combination of theories, critical ideas, and observations. So those are the three elements we just talked about. Your observations, the critical ideas from outside sources, and the theories that come from the text itself. Okay, so when I say theories, in nonfiction, that'll be the social commentary. In literature, that is the elements. That is the theme of the piece. That's the main message the author wants to express to the reading audience. Okay? So theories, ideas, and observations. Down here in blue, this is, again, off the net, but it says, this means, when you use synthesis, this means that each of your paragraphs will include multiple sources and citations as well as your own ideas and voice. So a key point to understand. This came from a writing center at a college. Each paragraph, not just one paragraph, but all paragraphs will include multiple sources and citations as well as your own ideas. You're going to learn how to blend these three elements without overburdening the paragraph, without writing too much in the paragraph. By the end of this course, your paragraph should be maybe 2/3 of a page, if they aren't already. I've seen some students who have reached that point. Be that as it may, that synthesis, excuse me, so I've put out here a paper that does not use synthesis. This is an example of what not to do. This paper is a C paper, a 70. You don't want a 70. Okay. Now, it is an MLA file. I'm sorry. It is in MLA fashion. So you got the last name of the author, the page number, you've got John A. Student, the course title, my name, and the date. Okay. So the items in red are what I'm going to pinpoint specifically. Do read through the whole paper to understand why it fails, what it's doing wrong. Okay? So the first thing it does wrong, right here, in the thesis statement, this is a horrible thesis statement. It sounds okay, but when you look at the evidence and what it's trying to say, it fails miserably. Specifically, when using a feminist lens, it becomes obvious how much modern culture has changed due to the influence of both Shakespeare's King Lear and the anonymous English poem, The Wife's Lament. Okay, the first major flaw here, lens titles are proper nouns. They should be in uppercase letters. So that should be a capital F, a capital L. Now that's a minor point. The thing that's a major point here, the author of the paper doesn't show what element of a feminist lens they are using when examining these two works. They're just saying it exists. They're not saying what it is. So where it says it becomes obvious, no, it doesn't become obvious. If you don't state it outright, it's not obvious. It does, where the thesis does aim for, it does talk about modern culture, and it does talk about King Lear and the topic. That's the topic, but it's not telling me what the point of the paper is. I have no sense of direction. Okay, just from this paragraph alone, it's a C paper. Okay, now the second paragraph. Notice the last sentence is a quote. Never end a paragraph with a quote. You, as a critic, have to have the last word, not the evidence. You have to explain to me how this quote connects back to this thesis. You're building bridges from the information provided to the thesis. So, part of the reason why this paper is failing, without a strong thesis, there's no way of defending the evidence, because the student is just cut and pasting the paper together. Grabbing a quote, saying that's evidence, and moving forward. You can't do that. You have to break down and explain everything you provide. Okay? So, notice it's only these two little things. These two little things are making this paper fail. And I haven't looked at the works cited page yet. Okay? Make sure you have a flow, a synthesis developing between the three elements of your observations, the text itself, and outside critical opinions. I have provided you with some sentence stems to guide you through this writing process. When you get the chance, do look at all of them. There's 10 of them out here. There are hundreds of ways of doing this. This is just to get you on the right direction. Okay. Number 3 is probably the one I like the best. After reading blank, or X, let me do it that way. After reading X, one can assume Y. This is due to Z. Okay? So what this student, imaginary student, is doing is showing the building blocks and showing how they operate. Or like with number 1, an average reader should understand why blank is true because. So right here, the word because is opening up the analysis. The first half of the sentence is evidence. The second half is analysis. Reviewing the material and showing how it connects back to the thesis. So whenever you quote, the first thing you want to do is say, this is true because. That's what the instructors are looking for. Why is this evidence true to you? Okay, this one video in particular, I'm going to close out after this rubric. This won't take long. But this is a research paper rubric. It's based on these 4 principles. The presentations in M.F.A. You have a strong thesis or value claim. We'll talk more about value claims later. The paragraph construction is sound. It has strong evidence and commentary analysis, and the perception of the material has a sophisticated academic approach. You want the paper to sound like an academic paper. No more colloquial terms. No more contractions. No more hesitancy. You want to be firm in your convictions of why the material meets your requirements for being a strong paper or a strong text, strong literary examination of a society. Okay? If you need me to go over this more in depth, by all means, let me know. But it should be clear and precise. Just to point out something, the instant right here under thesis and value claim, if the paper contains a weak thesis, lacks academic vernacular, bam, you're right in the C category. If your paragraphs consist of 3 sentences, C category. You can have a paper with synthesis that's weak and still get a C. So I'm just going to clarify something. When I say this, what I'm going for, if your synthesis is weak, that produces a C paper. No synthesis at all results in a D. Okay? No synthesis is a D. A weak synthesis, I hate that word, synthesis is a C. Okay, I'm going to stop here for the moment, and you'll have a third video, the notions of the modern self. So take a short break, relax, stretch out, get happy, be happy, and we'll talk more in just a sec.